Hey all, how you doing? Welcome. It's good to be back. I've had a lot of stuff happen I don't even want to get into, but instead let's just go to Russ and Mike. And what's going on, Russ?
So I was watching ESPN and they were talking about like the worst calls ever in sports history, and I knew they weren't going to go that deep because I mean even the host Stephen A. Smith is probably 10 years younger than me, but because when I was watching something when I was 9 years old, and I think Kevin's going to agree with this, to me, the biggest, worst call ever is the 72 Olympics where the men's Olympic team, the U.S. team, got really a gold medal stolen from. They replayed this game 3 times in the final 3 seconds. And at one point, and again, I was young, I think it was Phil Jackson on the inbound line where they said, oh, no, you can't stand on the inbound line because Phil Jackson had the longest arms known to man. It was ridiculous. I knew as a Knicks fan. And they were like, no, he has to stand back. And basically they made it so that the Russians could win 51-50. And nobody has picked up the silver medals from the U.S. team ever. They're still in the vault. That's how bad it is. But they didn't mention it on ESPN, so I tweeted it. But I just wanted the younger people to know this is, to me, the worst call ever.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the headlines of the paper was "We was robbed" or "We were robbed." I mean, it really was. I mean, they most newspapers editorialized about it, and as Russ is not exaggerating at all. Like it felt when you were watching it, and I was a teenager. Like they just were going to replay it until we got a Russian, until the Soviets got a win.
Yeah, there was an HBO documentary on it. I think Doug Collins was on that team as well, and
he made the winning foul shots.
Right, and the bitterness in his voice. I mean, this is 50 years after the fact or whatever. It was just, I mean, they've never even touched. I don't think they've ever even seen the silver medal.
No, I don't think they showed up for the medal ceremony.
No, they didn't. And I mean, I don't blame them because they did. I think it was 3, maybe 4 times, and they celebrated after, and then the referees are waving it. And remember, this is the 72 Olympics. This is the Olympics of the Israeli athletes getting killed. Mark Spitz winning all the gold. So this was a tumultuous Olympics, and this was on not in terms of sport a big black mark, but obviously the Israeli athletes being assassinated was the real story of that Olympics.
Yeah. I mean, and if it was the upset if it was the gold medal won by we would be talking about that in the same breath that we mentioned the Miracle on Ice. Like that would have been a major thing, but everybody knows it was so shady that it just doesn't come up in that regard.
Absolutely right.
Yep. All right, let's get started then. I guess.
My computer's got 1 second. Sorry, guys. Sorry, I'm going to log out when you're back.
Okay, yeah, I saw you were logging.
Well, I'll kill time first while Ebok is doing that.
You're right back.
Just to say that I was in New York for a Yankees game on Friday, and I have to say that the as opposed to driving, taking the Amtrak was relaxing. I was able to get some work done, writing there and back. But the solitude of driving by yourself, as opposed to a family of 7 with 5 kids under the age of 10, and all of them running up and down the aisles, screaming bloody murder. It made me say, okay, I'm never taking the train again. I mean, it was very, I mean, the time was good. There weren't any major delays, but just people going nuts. I mean, I need to be myself sometimes. And that was like one of those times. That's all I can say. But the game was great. And I have to say, Russ knows my the Hebrew National hot dogs and the garlic fries. They're definitely a plus at Yankee Stadium. So I'm trying to bring extra session back.
Hi guys, I think this is better.
All right, let's get started.
All right, here we go. I got the date right. Hello, Hockey World. It is Monday, July 24th, 2023. Tricky.
I'm Michael Agello, I think.
I'm Russ Cohen. I guess it's 2023. I don't know.
It's 7/24/20. Go ahead, Kev.
I'm Kevin Allen, Detroit Hockey Now. It's definitely 2023.
Yes, I'm back. And the only reason the dates are ever an issue is because I'm back. Because I'm Eklund, you're watching HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. It's the podcast that comes to you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday in the summer. And then back again, back to full tilt come September. I have a lot. I know I've got a lot of rumors about stuff, guys, because I'm an interesting sociological experiment here, because I have been in hospitals and trapped in different places, and I have not really been paying attention to anything but my texts and the people who've been talking to me. So I've been off of Twitter. I don't know what people are talking about anywhere else. I thought this would be kind of like, I was going to, before I went on today, I'm like, I should go on to Reddit and see. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that at all. I'm just going to go on and tell you what I've been hearing all by myself, and whether or not it's true that what anyone else is saying, Kevin, or what you're hearing or anything like that. This is completely new, weird experience. Okay, so I'm going to go through some of the things today, and this I'm sure is out there. But, well, maybe it's not out there. Like I said, I don't know it yet. But the Sabres are obviously trying to make a deal, and they've been trying to make a deal with a couple different teams. And even before I went into dark hiding, they were trying to make a deal with Calgary. Now they're trying to make one with Arizona. And what I was told is they actually have had strong talks about Clayton Keller. I don't know what strong talks defines as. That's a new word for me, like from a GM, but they've had strong talks with Carolina, with Arizona about Clayton Keller. Is that possible? What do you think? What do you think of that?
Well, okay. I'd be surprised. I mean, I do know that the Sabres right now are lined up to extend Rasmus Dahlin probably over $10 million a year. They want to extend Owen Power for as long as they possibly can. If they can't get him on an 8-year deal, then probably it's a bridge deal. They're not so far under the cap that they could take another $7+ million on Keller unless salary is going out. And
Right.
Other than Victor Olofsson, who's making about $4, a little under $5 on a 1-year deal, they really don't have any money that they want to move out. So
Yeah.
I don't think it's like, and now Jack Quinn is out probably until the new year.
Right.
But they have a lot of depth in terms of young forwards that they're like sort of anxious to see if those guys can play in the NHL, like Matthew Savoy and Yuri Kulik. So I really would be surprised that they go down that road and trade for a guy like Keller.
Well, Keller's such a desirable player that if he had an opportunity, I think everybody would look at it.
Yeah.
However, Mike is right. Like,
Yeah.
they were the third best scoring team in the league last year, and they didn't make the playoffs. So, I don't know that that's, other than the fact that it is Clayton Keller and he's a good player, I don't know that makes a whole lot of sense.
Right.
Their offense is already pretty good. So if they were going to make a bold move, you would think it would be, to bring in yet one more seasoned, star quality defenseman or a goalie.
So I said what you and Mike just said to the people I was talking to. I said that same thing because that made logical sense, right? I like to throw these out before I tell you what I was told in response to those things. So that's what I said.
Well, look, all right.
Go ahead, Russ. What do you think?
Let me throw this out there, and I don't know if it's possible, but Jeff Skinner once waived his no move to get into the expansion draft to get out of Buffalo.
Right.
Would Jeff Skinner be willing to get out of Buffalo to do that, knowing that if he goes to Arizona, it's only temporary, and then they're eventually going to trade him somewhere else anyhow?
He didn't waive his no move to get out of Buffalo. He waived his no move so they could protect somebody else in the expansion draft. He does not want to leave. It was under the understanding that he was not, and probably he knew he wasn't going to get claimed because he had 5 years left at $9 million. So
that was that weird loophole of no move clauses during that whole thing, right?
Right, exactly.
So here's the thing. I said that too, and I said they had plenty of scoring and all that stuff. And the response I got back was this: they did have plenty of scoring last year, but do you know that they have all the confidence in all those scorers to do that again and continue that pace, or do they think that some of those guys are at their high end right now and they can move them for a good cost? Where Clayton Keller they feel is solid, and the coach there knows Clayton Keller very well.
Oh, yeah, they have coaches there that worked with him at the NTDP.
Sure. I would say, like, if their scoring was coming from old Coots, I would say that would be a concern, but their scoring is coming from young guys. So I don't know that even really Like I think Tage Thompson for real.
Oh, I think I don't think he's involved in this at all. I think obviously he's
well, who's the old other than Skinner? Like who? And he's not archaic.
Well, no, and Tuck is in his mid-20s, and then you're talking about Paterka and Dylan Cousins and Quinn
and Cousins and these guys. There's a lot of secondary scoring there that's better than secondary scoring.
Yeah, and okay, Keller is, purportedly would be your second line center. So what are you moving Tage Thompson back to the wing, or are you moving Cousins to the wing? You're sort of displacing two of your best.
I agree. I don't know. I don't know the answer.
So that's why I don't think it's realistic. Now, if it was a defenseman who was making that kind of money, then and we were talking about Hannafin. Okay, that's a possibility. I mean, I honestly continue to believe that their number one need is a goaltender, but I know that they're sold on Devin Levi as the number one, but I don't think it's a bad move to go out and get a goalie if it's for 1 or 2 years. But I don't seem to agree with that. So
mathematically, I was just kind of doing it quickly in my head, and I think it works. Mathematically, if they traded Middlestat and took Keller, they probably could float it because they have like $6 million free now.
Yeah, but it's down the line, Russ. That's what I was talking about, because Keller's got multiple years left.
I know.
Yeah.
I'm talking about now because maybe they have a future plan.
That's a good point, Russ. The other thing, next thing I want to talk about is bigger. The only reason I bring up Clayton Keller first is because I just talked to somebody about that this morning. But I want to get to the bigger thing I've been talking to about people over the last couple of days, and that is the Erik Karlsson holdup explained. And this is how it's been explained to me, and I don't know if it's been explained by other writers out there the same way or what have you, or if you heard different things, Kevin, or however. This is what it's explained to me. There was a big thing at the draft that Toronto was going to go after Erik Karlsson. That was obvious. We all talked about that before. That was a big rumor that was floating out there. I was told that by many people. You guys were at the draft. You heard that too, I'm sure. You might not have believed it, but you heard it.
I don't believe it, but continue.
Right. So, and that whatever offer that Toronto was talking to them about then was contingent on them being able to move Nylander, obviously. And there are a ton of cap space right now, right? So they have to do more than move Nylander, but the reality is the move Nylander has to happen. So the Sharks like that deal, and the Sharks still like that deal more than anything that's come from Carolina, Edmonton, or Pittsburgh. Those are the three other teams that are still involved. Edmonton, I was told, is still involved. Pittsburgh is still involved, very much so. Carolina, I was told, was sort of leaning towards not being involved. And one of the reasons there that I was kind of waiting for this reason to come out was that Brent Burns and Karlsson already played together, and it wasn't the greatest thing in the world. Like, they when they were together, they both kind of play the same spot. So they both sort of, there was a lot of.
More would change that. I have a hard time. I think it's more about the money. I don't think it's that.
Well, it is about the money, but with all the stuff you have to do to make the money, is it worth it if you're going to get a guy who's going to come in and really?
Well, that's a combination thing then. Yeah.
Right. If you got to do all this stuff, is it worth it bringing a guy who's going to be 2/3 as good as he was without Brent Burns, still good, and bring Brent Burns down to like 2/3 of where he is right now? That was how it was explained to me. So, but if the Nylander trade can happen, Toronto's very much back in it. That's what I've heard. So,
let Kev talk about the Karlsson thing.
Yeah. Well, what I was going to say, this is what I know about it, and a lot of it is through the media. I mean, just to give everyone some history, when you get foreign press reports, like if it's Russia or the Czech Republic, you always got to be a little skeptical because they play a little bit fast and loose. But when the report comes out of Sweden, because historically Swedish players talk to the Swedish media, and the Swedish media play it straight. Erik Karlsson said, "Yeah, I talked to 4 teams, and the Maple Leafs were one of them." So that something happened there. Like they wouldn't have given him permission unless Toronto was interested. So obviously, at some point, there was some interest. He did not put any timestamp on that. Right. So we don't know if that was all recent or it was at the draft or whatever. The latest and the other problem is, and I know this for a fact, the problem that's holding everything up is how much San Jose is willing to retain. That is the biggest problem. That is the problem every team has with this, and that is they only want to go down into the $7 million plus range, which makes it very difficult for every one of those teams to try to make a deal. Right. And with Pittsburgh, they want to give Petrie back. And guess what? San Jose does not want Petrie.
Right.
They don't want to take salary back. So not only are you you're trying to trade a $7.5 million team to 4 teams that have no cap space.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to take any cap back. And on top of all that, you want your 2 first-round picks. Although I hear there's some softening of that about that. Like it'll be, a first-round pick and a really, really good player or so forth. So that's kind of what's holding it up. I don't think that Carolina may have talked about that issue that Eck brought up, but I think their position and I think the Penguins' position, because I think everybody knows, is that they're 2 great players, and as always the case, our coach and our team will figure out how to make that work. Whether that's right or wrong.
Is that always the case, though, Kevin?
Yeah, it is. Everyone's always arrogant about that they know how to do it better.
Well, that's what they say, but really at the end of the day, does it always work? It doesn't.
But the issue is
it doesn't. But I don't think.
So go ahead, Kevin. Sorry.
Well, I'm just going to throw out that I don't think that would hold it up. I think it's more apt to be the cost of it all versus that. But I think it is a concern. I don't think there's any doubt about it.
Yeah, the issue here with San Jose, like Kevin was saying, is not only the retention, but what they have to take back. And for teams that are contenders like Pittsburgh or Carolina, they don't have a bunch of cap space. So the only thing is that unless they're sending contracts back to San Jose, they have to find a way to jettison players in deals. And okay, if it's, say for example, it's Carolina, they have to find a place to trade Tarasenko. They have to find a place to trade Pesci. And if they do that, then they have room for for Karlsson. But the problem is that everybody knows they would want to trade Tarasenko and they want to trade Pesci, so they're not going to get face value for those guys. The Leafs, I think if there was a deal there regarding Karlsson, it has to involve Nylander going back to San Jose. Now, I don't know whether Nylander wants to sign with San Jose or whether he'd be a 1 year and then they would flip him. But if Nylander continues to demand 10 plus million, he's not going to be in Toronto past next year. So I think the likelihood of a Nylander deal is still out there. I just don't see the fit. And, apparently Brad Treliving, and Kevin can confirm this, Brad Treliving talks to everybody. He talks to 31 other general managers.
Yeah.
But the fact that he checked in on Erik Karlsson, I'm going to be getting a phone call in a few minutes. He's going to check in on me. It doesn't mean anything.
Oh, no, it does mean something. They wouldn't have given permission to speak to him unless they thought it was legitimate.
Yeah.
So, it doesn't mean that they were close to a deal.
Right.
But I'm telling you that Mike Greer felt strongly enough about the possibility that they let him talk to it.
He's not going to let him talk to him unless he has some
right. Yeah, there had to be some structure there. I think everything you said is true, Mike, but they don't give permission, to everybody who calls up.
Well, Nylander at $10 million, of course, is insane everywhere. That's not a situation with just Toronto. That's not a situation.
and that's the thing. Like, he's not going to get that. I know we're more from Karlsson and Nylander, but if there is a Karlsson deal involving the Leafs, I think it would have to involve Nylander, because I don't think that they're going to trade some of their young, inexpensive assets like Matthew Nyes, maybe Nick Robertson or something like that. But he's a guy who's got a lot of injury issues, so I don't see the fit. And plus, Treliving is well known to want big, tough defensemen. And Erik Karlsson's he's one of the best defensemen in the league. He's an offensive juggernaut, but he's not what Treliving exactly wants on his blue line. So that's why I just don't see it happening.
Another thing that was thrown out there is Treliving is not, and this is just what I was told, but it was told by somebody who really who's talked to Treliving quite a bit about this. Not a fan of Morgan Riley, which I thought was surprising. And he thinks I like Morgan Riley a lot. I think he's a good defenseman, but he thinks he's overrated. And
that's all fine and good, but he's got a no movement clause, so you better become a big fan of him.
Sure. I'm not saying it, but that's an interesting. That could, if you're not a fan of Morgan Riley, suddenly you might want Karlsson a little bit more. You got to get that top defenseman, the top scoring defenseman that you think. I don't think it's necessarily fair on Morgan Riley. I thought especially this year in the playoffs, he looked pretty good and he showed up, but
yeah, and the signing of Klingberg is a sign that they wanted somebody with a bigger shot on the point on the power play, and that will alleviate Riley because Riley does not have a big shot at the point. That's one of his big failings as an offensive defenseman. But he's a really good puck rusher. I think he's improved as a two-way guy, and he's probably going to play more 5-on-5.
5-on-5, he gets a lot of points, man.
Yeah. So I mean, like I said, Treliving better learn to like him because he's not going anywhere for the next 7 years.
There you go.
Well,
all right.
7, like there's a time when guys.
Well, no, he's got a no move clause.
I get it, but they don't want to stay all 7 years. That's what I'm saying.
Right, but I'm saying it's good when he does move, Russ. It's going to be where he wants to go because
where is he from?
Where's
he from?
He's from Vancouver.
He's from Vancouver. All right. That's where I would start if I wanted to move him. I would start there because maybe he does move his nose.
I'm sure the Leafs would take Quinn Hughes.
I'm just saying. All right, Russ. Let's talk Tarasenko.
Okay.
Still out there. His agent came on way too strong. Everybody's told me the same thing that his agent wanted crazy things. And that's why.
His agent Pat Brisson now? Is that his agent now?
So he fired his agent. Yeah, he went to a new agent. But there were teams that were definitely interested early on. But
the other way that Pat Brisson works, like
I know, but I don't. So he's Pat Brisson's agency, but I don't know that. Doesn't Pat Brisson have other people under him too?
He does. But
I think the person handling Tarasenko was not directly Pat Brisson, I was told.
Okay.
But that doesn't matter either here nor there, right? It's Pat Brisson.
Yeah. It's his
agent. So whatever they had a much higher perception of what they could get, what he was going to be able to get, and Brisson, I'm sure, okayed that. So the whole, here's the whole thing. Now he's with somebody else, right? So, and the other team, some of the teams that were interested in him before are coming back and looking at him. What is he really worth, Rush? You saw him the most. What do you think?
I think he's only worth a 1-year deal, and I think he could get $5 million on a 1-year deal. But I think he wants a 2-year deal, and I don't think you can get a 2-year deal to a contender. I think that's the problem and why there's been no movement, because I think he's either going to accept a 2-year deal with a team that has lesser playoff aspirations, because I don't think he wants another 1-year deal. And I just feel like I don't know anything in the situation. That's just how I'm reading it.
But do you think he's worth a 1-year deal, 5 year, like $5 million, but not more than that?
Well, I think he's only going to get a 1-year deal simply because he dropped off from 82 points 2 years ago. Last year he had 50 between the Rangers and the Blues. He's 31 years old. He's had injury issues. I mean, I think he's a good player. Don't get me wrong, but I think
shoulders aren't great. Like he's had couple of shoulder issues.
Right. So, I mean, the age, the injury history, he's coming off an 8-year deal. I mean, he's not to say he's got to prove it again, because I think he's a proven guy, but I just can't see a team signing him multiple years. He's at that point in his career where it's going to be a year-to-year thing.
So teams I've heard interested: Penguins, Ottawa, Washington, and Florida. So, and I know 2 of those teams were involved very big in the beginning, but thought the asking price was crazy. But 2 of those teams are back. Kevin, have you heard anything about Tarasenko?
Yeah, I mean, Tarasenko, the Carolina was in on him too at some point, but they're not anymore. I think a 1-year deal at 5+ is probably what teams are trying to pitch, but and eventually he may get there, because I don't think he wants to go to a team that's not, in his mind, a contender. So, it'll just come down to does Carolina or Pittsburgh pull out of the Karlsson thing? Because he's sort of held hostage a little bit by the Karlsson deal.
Yes.
So he's got to sort of decide, unless he wants to just try to go elsewhere. But the big, these teams that are all in on these, Tarasenko and Karlsson, like their cap situation, like if the Penguins, for example, don't do anything with Karlsson or Tarasenko, they got to cut $3 million. Right. Like they got to find a way. They're already going to have to dump a salary.
Yeah.
So it's really incumbent upon Pittsburgh to move Petrie, or for Carolina to trade Pesce. They're going to have to do something bold if they want to get involved in all this.
Yeah, for sure.
It may behoove Tarasenko to take a 1-year deal like a couple of other players did, simply to wait for the cap to go up. I mean, a team like, and we had on our Off the Post show, we had David Dwork, who covers the Panthers, And the Panthers, after this year, only have 8 players under contract in terms of NHL deals. They got a boatload of cap space, and he could take a 1-year deal for $4 million in Florida, which is now I don't know if Florida can afford it right now, but
They can.
But $4 million there is more than $4 million in other places because of the non-tax state tax thing, and then they have so much money opening up the following year that wink wink nudge nudge, here's a contract in the desk for next year that they could sign them to after January 1st. Maybe that's a type of deal that can happen. But I just don't know whether he's going to get a multiple year deal from anybody who's a contender simply because they don't have the room to do it.
No, it's true. I mean, and I think he would be wise to go to a place where he can show something, and be in a spot where he can be a factor going and take a 1-year deal, because then, with more cap space next year and a lot of cap space opening up in general next year on a lot of teams, not just Florida.
He could be a replacement for he could be the replacement for Duclair in Florida. I mean, that they need a scoring winger.
Yeah.
Yeah. The only thing is, Zach, I just feel like, with the talent he has, and he still has talent, he would have been somewhere already if he was willing to take 1 year, I think.
Right.
I think you're right. Now, I'm not saying that won't change because it's going to
money at least.
Right. We're the 24th of July, so
He's asking for like 7.5. Nobody's going to pay it.
Yeah, I heard 3 years. 19 million.
3 years, 19
He's
million.
dreaming.
That's what I heard. So I don't know. That was like
Technicolor.
Not really feasible, right? So
unless he's going to take it from a team that's like Anaheim or something like that, but right. I don't see those teams signing anybody to a 3-year deal.
Let's talk about Matthew Dumba for a second. He's another player that I've been tracking a lot of, and he's available out there, and it's kind of surprising that he's available out there.
It's surprising, but Kev, the thing I heard out there was that Dumba was associated to San Jose, Arizona as well. But if he's tied to San Jose, then he's another one who's stuck in the Karlsson.
Yeah, he for sure is. And it didn't help that he had like a 14-point season last year. And he wants to be paid like a top-bearing defenseman. But, you got to produce more than 14 points. So, he's still a 20-plus minute player, but I'm not sure that.
Besides scoring, he's a lot. He does bring a lot besides
scoring.
Here's
what he does do. You're right about the points, but he is over 21 minutes. He has 116 blocks and 104 hits.
And he gets penalty, and he's intimidating. He's an intimidating
character. Yeah, he's still pretty desirable, but he does have to raise his offense.
Yeah, I think you're right on, Russ. I talked to a GM who characterized him. He's a little above average as a shot blocker and a physical player. But he said, I've got guys with hands of stone that get 20 points. And so, like, what was happening last season where he just sort of fell off?
I asked my friend Dan this, who covers the Wild for us, and who was there who goes to all the Wild games. And he really believes that he was played, that the coach just played him in all kinds of poor situations. I've been hearing this for Dan for a couple of years now, that he thinks that Dumba's really just been misunderstood. He said Dumba, when he gets out there and gets into the right spot, he's really successful, but he gets put into bad situations all the time.
Yeah, but if you look at his point, he had 50 points 5 years ago. That was his best.
Yeah,
since then, he's been in the mid-20s, and last year he had the bad misfortune of having his worst offensive year in his walk year. So
find out, Mike, like when he's out there, which line is out there with him.
Yeah, I'd love to know that too, and I should get Dan on at some point to talk about this, because
that would be what I want to know. Because look, the Wild have the bottom lines on the Wild. I don't think they produce much, and I don't know.
Yeah, they're basically holding lines. They hold the grounds, right. And I know also that Guerin liked him. Like, Guerin did not want to let him go. But he could. But the price Dumba was asking, there was no way he could keep him.
You want to know
that's the issue. Yeah.
You want to know how physical he is? Just ask Joe Pavelski after he got wasted by him in the playoffs. He is a very physical defenseman. I think he's a second pairing. He's like a 4. I think he's a pretty decent 4. But the problem is, like everybody else, he wants multiple years. Is he willing to bet on himself on a 1-year deal and wait a year to get bigger money?
I think he will be, and I think he has to be. the really interesting thing about him, and I can swear to this, has never happened to me before, is I have had calls from 4, maybe 5 people around the NHL, like one owner, two players, one owner, an assistant coach, and another like team guy. None connected to Matthew Dumba at all directly, saying why the heck isn't Matthew Dumba signed? I really hope he gets signed soon. Everybody wants to see this guy succeed. Like there's a big group of people out there that like him and that want him. And I've never seen that before.
There is a group of people believe that he has an agreement in place with San Jose, and San Jose is assuring him that eventually, one thing we didn't talk about at Karlsson is the rumbling recently has been that Karlsson has basically told San Jose, you're going to have to figure something out.
Yeah, he's not coming back.
But it's easy to say that, but who's walking away from $11 million?
Right. Like, we can't trade you. Here's your jersey.
Yeah.
and I know Russ scoffed at this when I said it yesterday, but I think it has to be at the top of Mike Greer's mind. Okay. Erik Karlsson's 31 years old. He's coming off a Norris Trophy. He's definitely a Hall of Famer. He's won 3 Norris Trophies, so he's one of the best defensemen in the league. Maybe top 10, top 15 in NHL history. But he has injury issues. He's had a lot of injury issues. He didn't have them last year, and when he stayed healthy, he scored 100 points. You do not want to go into the season with him on your roster and him getting hurt. If you're going to trade him, you're going to trade him before the season because you don't want to risk losing an asset because he gets hurt. And being I
disagree, and I'll stop again because nobody's talking about Erik Karlsson getting hurt anymore. I haven't heard any of that.
Well, I am, Russ, and that's all that matters.
You're the one.
Yeah.
Well, you actually.
Yeah, I mean, I think you even have to admit that you're just over the top about. That's just your thing. But guys get hurt, but I don't think like it's a foregone conclusion that he'll get hurt again. He might, but he might not. So. But I do think there's always a risk that if you don't trade a guy, that he's going to get injured. But the fact that he's 33 years old, like to me, I would just want to get this deal done and move on.
Yeah. So at this point, they really just have to. There is a point to Mike, your craziness there, in that San Jose, he's been in a low impact situation. Like you put him on. If you set something on Boston, just like throw a team out there. He's gonna get chances to get hurt more. Like he's gonna be in that spot, like where he's gonna be in more like in San Jose, they've been able to play him really in not highly intensive situations where he's got to be blocking shots or got to be suddenly hitting people. Right. Somebody can compare him to the Terrell Owens of the NHL. Like he's unbelievably talented, not in an attitude way, but just the unbelievable raw talent. But also very specific to a team. Like you have to have the right situation for him to do what he did at San Jose, and a lot of people don't think he has that other places. So that's also definitely holding him up. That's why he's $7 million is even a lot. Like Kevin said,
that's why I don't think he's a fit with Carolina because it's against the sort of.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree 100%. Yeah. They have so many defensemen.
Pittsburgh, he's a fit with. Yeah. Not Carolina.
I think Edmonton he's a fit with. I think Toronto he's a fit with. I don't see him being a fit with Carolina. Backlund. Let's talk about Backlund from Calgary. He's another guy I've heard a lot about in the last little bit here. Another guy who seems to want out of there.
And that's
out of there.
Let me ask the question: who wants to stay in Calgary? Because so far nobody does. And Lindholm is the one that everybody is like, okay, there's still no accurate indicator of whether he wants to stay and sign a long-term deal. Hanifin wants out. Backlund wants out. I haven't heard anything about Zadorov or Tanev, but they, so all these guys with a year left in their contracts, they're basically telling Craig Conroy, get me the hell out of here. Or I'm
not. Strong voice was Johnny Gaudreau. Like we never heard this until Johnny Gaudreau left Calgary.
Yeah. Well, Calgary, I wouldn't say that, but it wasn't as bad as we've heard, about Winnipeg or Columbus, I think Edmonton and Calgary have always sort of experienced that, except in the 80s when the Oilers were so dominant. But I think it's always been harder to keep players there. But what's interesting about this is, I just said this on a radio show, Sutter's gone.
I know.
And players still want out. So that tells you that it wasn't just how bad last season was. This is just, for whatever reason, I don't want to live in Calgary, or I don't want to be in Calgary, or I don't like the potential of Calgary moving forward, or whatever it is.
Which I've never heard. I know it's cold, but I know lots of players who played there who loved it there. I don't understand. That's why this is not anything like Winnipeg to me.
Yeah, but a lot of guys just don't want to live in Western, Canada. It's
basically like living in Denver. They're very similar type cities.
Now, Denver's warmer. Denver's got more warm temperatures. Denver could be 65 and then snow that night, but it's still warmer during the day.
Heck, it's not only the Western Canada thing. We've talked about Winnipeg for years, and they've got their problems with Hellebuck and with Mark Scheifele. But it's also the oldest building, or one of the oldest buildings in the league, and they still, from what I remember, they still haven't straightened that out in terms of a new building being built. So they're in a bad building. They're in a division where they're coming up against Edmonton and Vegas all the time. You had one star leave and they got nothing for him. You had another star tell them he wanted out, and they at least got something for him. And then now you've got two guys locked up on long-term deals. One guy in Huberdeau was overpaid to stay there and had one of the worst years of his career. And Kadri, anybody in their right mind wouldn't have locked up him long-term because of his attitude, but he won a Stanley Cup and they really had no choice. So, it's an organization in turmoil right now.
It is. And this is what our Randy is our local Calgary guy, has been for 20 years with Hockey Buzz. He's always been out there, talking to us about what's happening in Calgary. So I trust when he says something, for sure. And him saying that this is not Sire, this is a locker room issue I
wonder who's the problem? The guys are going.
Everyone to get away.
Yeah, Kachuk is gone. Gaudreau is gone.
Huberdeau apparently was the problem. He did not, at least in his first year, did not attach himself well to that locker room, and I think his play was an indicator of that. Maybe that changes. All we heard was, okay, they're going to go out and they're going to bring in the former coach who ended up being in Nashville as the coach in Calgary, because he would get the best out of Huberdeau, or they were going to trade for Duclair to get the best out of Huberdeau. So they're worried about getting the best out of him because they didn't in the first year. And he's only locked up for 7 more years.
Well, that was the talk. That was the talk in Florida, and that's where True Living should have been careful, because
he had no choice. He had no choice.
What do you mean he had no choice?
He had a choice on the re-signing and all that stuff.
The re-signing, yes, but
he didn't have to do what he did there, I don't think.
Right.
Huberdeau was coming up with.
This was out there for Huberdeau. This is not like new news. This is not like all of a sudden stuff.
I guess we better define what locker room issues are. I obviously see it differently than you guys do. To me, a locker room issue is a leadership issue, and unless I don't know Huberdeau as well as I think I do, he has never, ever been thought of as a leader.
Right. But he's coming in to replace Kachuk, Kevin. That's like.
No, I realize that. So is this a locker room issue, or is this?
No. I think it's what you're saying, Kev. That it's the fact that he isn't a leader, and why are you paying so much?
They want him to be. So in other words, it's a problem with one guy as opposed to locker room issues to me are like Parisi and Suter when they were in charge, and they weren't. The perception was, at least among their teammates, that they were not good leaders.
Right.
So that's what I see as a locker room issue. Now, if it's one guy, then the issue there is you got to get a leader that can bring him around, or you got to get rid of Huberdeau, which is
good luck with that.
Going to be good luck with that. That's exactly right. So
I don't know. I am I crazy to think that Montreal would take a shot at Huberdeau?
You are crazy.
You're crazy.
Contract.
You're crazy.
No, he's only 100-point scorer. It's only one bad year, guys. It's like.
But he hasn't been a 100-point scorer that many times where you could say he's a 100-point scorer either.
No, but he's close enough. He's been.
Well, okay, I'll couch it this way, Ak. If Montreal was giving them 2 bad contracts on their books, like Brendan Gallagher, who's chronically injured now, then maybe they would do that deal. I can't see them taking 7 years of $9.5, $10 million for Huberdeau right now. I just can't see it. They've got young players. They've got a young core with Caulfield and Suzuki. They got Slavkovsky. They're going in a positive direction. I don't know whether they want to put a $10 million boat anchor on their roster.
Randy in the chat room says to Kevin that leadership. No one wants to be the leader here. He says it's a divided issue that way. And
now that makes more sense. Because that to me that is a locker room issue. If there's no leader emerges, so right. I accept that now. I just didn't kind of know that. I'm just I mean it's always difficult when people say what's a locker room issue because to different people it means different things.
Yeah,
and to me locker room issue is leadership. So if the problem is nobody's willing to be the leader there, then that is an issue.
Yeah. And think of this. Go ahead.
And that comes to Gaudreau and Tkachuk. I mean, two born leaders, right? Like two guys who are naturally good leaders are gone.
You lost Giordano 2 years ago, who was your captain.
Another guy, right?
And you had
in 11 years, he has 668 points in 750 games. He's not even a point per game player.
Right. Well, okay, but
now, some of that
a lot of bad Florida teams.
Okay, you can't say that anymore because when he was on a decent team this year, he couldn't score either.
My point was they had Giordano as the leader, who'd been the longtime leader there, who took the throne from Iginla, and then after he leaves, the mantle passes to Gaudreau and Tkachuk, and they were able to take that. Now, Elias Lindholm's not a leader. Huberdeau's not a leader. God forbid you want Nazem Kadri to be a leader.
Oh, and obviously Backlund's not either. So you're in a spot where you're getting these guys like, Backlund had a great season. Hanifin should be a leader, right? I would think Hanifin's a lead. He's been a leader in the past, but he hasn't necessarily.
I never hear about leadership stuff with Hanifin. You just don't hear anything. You don't hear anything.
So then they have a lot, and this is a city, not to focus too much on Calgary. This is a city that really has had a history of great leaders on their team. Like they've always had leaders. Like go back to, Al McGinnis and Joel Otto and all these guys that were really in their time were just like Joe Nieuwendyk for a bit, and like obviously like you said, Iginla for years, and even Suter and he was there, And there's a lot of they've had strong. What was that?
It's changed.
It's changed, obviously, to the point where it's changed so much that we're for the first time perhaps seeing that people aren't thrilled about playing there, which is really.
Is Mangiapane a leader?
Yeah.
No, I love
He's
Benji.
a top 10 NHL scorer.
He is a top scorer. And I hope he gets to a place that will show him that. Man, if he goes into Toronto and leads you to a Stanley Cup night, you will thank me. If he ends up a Leaf and it leads him to the Stanley Cup, you will thank me so many times, Mike, because that's where he's heading. Mangiapane's going to head to Toronto eventually. Not now, maybe not. In a couple years.
I do have a sidebar here, though. I just saw it from NHL publication, public relations. Marc-Andre Fleury has 8 wins from passing Patrick Waugh.
I know.
Wow.
8 wins. That's crazy. I mean, it's not crazy to think he's that good because I wrote an article about him when he was in juniors. So you could tell he was going to be a star goalie. But then he had the World Juniors where he gave away the puck and lost the gold medal quickly. And, then he's had up and downs with Vegas and with Pittsburgh, too. Lost his job. And he's still going to have all those wins. Like, it is incredible. Now, I get we're also in the era of the shootout. And, he's probably got, maybe 15 wins for the shootout or something. But whatever, it's still a pretty damn good record, man.
No, it is. It is. And who, if for some reason he doesn't get that record, Alan Walsh is to blame. No, he is, because the reality is that the contract he signed with the Pittsburgh Penguins in the beginning, remember, was so ridiculous that the Penguins didn't play him for half a year.
Yes. And
he would have been playing if that contract wasn't that way. He would have been playing in that year, and he would have had his 8 wins by now.
Oh, he definitely would have had it by now.
It's funny because there was a thing in The Athletic about top goaltending prospects, and Wallstedt, who's Minnesota's first-round pick from a couple years ago, was ranked number 1. Askarov was ranked number 2, and Devin Levi was ranked number 3. And if you look at the 3 goaltenders, Wallstedt is probably going to play in the AHL again this year because Fleury and Gustafsson are in Minnesota. And the same thing with Askarov, who's going to be behind Saros and Lankinen in Nashville. But the Sabres are going to play Levi as a number 1. when those guys had extensive experience in Sweden and in Russia and in the AHL, but Levi's coming right out of the NCAA. That's why I'm very skeptical about Levi and the Sabres. Not because I don't think he's good. I just think they're rushing him. And
if
those
Levi was 23 coming out of college, I'd be like, this is fine. But
Right.
he's 21.
Right. So
it does feel like he's skipping a step or two.
I have a funny story about Fleury's pads because someone was talking about that.
The big yellow pads. We love those.
Big yellow pads, yeah. So he came into Philly. I was in the locker room one of the first couple of years there. The first year he had the big yellow pads. I went to him and I actually said, what about this? Because my wife had said, hey,
hello, I'm back.
No problem. So I'm talking about Fleury's yellow pads for a second. I don't know how we got that there, Kevin. That's where we got to. So
just so Kev knows, he's 8 wins from passing Patrick Waugh.
Yeah, Marc-Andre Fleury's 8 wins from passing Patrick Waugh.
Oh wow!
And I said, had Alan Walsh not signed that ridiculous contract in his rookie year, he'd already have those wins because Pittsburgh didn't play him because they couldn't play him, in the ridiculous way that contract read. Anyway, but the reality is, my wife kept saying those yellow pads. It seems like they're so easy. They're so bad because players see exactly where they are all the time. She's like, I understand people wearing white pads, because you might look and see white opening, but the yellow was so bright. And I brought that up to him in the locker room, actually, and just, I said, do you ever worry about the yellow pads being like so bright people can see them all the time? And he's like, no, not at all. They disappeared the next week.
Wow.
I'm just total coincidence probably, but I'm just saying, just throwing it out there. It's absolutely.
He won his 300th win in Philly because I remember that he came in with the Golden Knights and he had his 300th win there. And I'm telling you, there's not a happier guy on earth. If you interview Marc-Andre Fleury after a game, it doesn't even matter if he won or lost. This guy is perpetually happy, man.
I'll ask a stupid question. Is there a regulation against a goaltender wearing black pads? Because you would think if they wore black pads that the player wouldn't see the
lost, man.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know. I've never heard that question posed before. I would think yes, but I don't know.
I would think yes too, but I would think a Stars goalie has been close to that at times because, when teams switch to black and they're already like a dark green, you got to wonder if they were the kind of close. Maybe
I agree, Russ. I've seen some guys like that too. I don't know, but I think that. I thought the white pads were actually the ones that should be illegal, honestly.
And Andrew says he's seen black pads. I kind of feel like we have.
Yeah, I do too. Like what's his name? I think of it later. But one of those old, when not Red Wings, Stars goalies, like you're saying it. Turcotte maybe, or no, not Turcotte. I don't know what's his name.
No, Turcotte didn't, but
some goalie I can think of anyway that I remember back then. Turco, thank you, Turco. There we go.
Oh, Turco, I don't think
he did wear black. That's what he said in the chat room too, and I agree. That's what I was thinking of too.
I don't remember him having black. I remember him having green and black.
So you brought up another name that I wanted to talk about rumor-wise, and this is going to be the last thing before we get out of here. And then I'm glad Kevin's back with this. Is Yuri Saros? Okay, so Saros, UC Saros, not Yuri.
Corey Crawford had black pants with a little red in it.
Yeah, right. Okay. So UC Saros, obviously great year last year. It's great to have a goalie like him because it helps. It's always going to make Predators competitive, but then again, it's always going to make the Predators competitive. The Predators are trying to change their style around. They have Askarov coming. There are teams out there that would be interested in Saros, Kevin. I've heard that some calls have happened between different teams and the Predators about it.
Well, I think there was some discussion at the trade deadline, but I think they made it clear that they would only move him in a blockbuster deal, and I don't think they feel like they want to trade him, but they would if it was an unbelievable deal because they're kind of retooling. They don't want to call it a rebuild, So
they don't want to call it a rebuild. I know. No. But they're changing everything. They really are doing it. They brought out the two guys that they had to get rid of, which is great.
But the interesting thing is
offensive style.
Yes. We haven't really talked about that, but I wonder how David Poile feels about that. He would not have been allowed to do that.
Right.
That Matt Duchene, he would not have been allowed.
The
interesting thing is that at the draft, we heard exactly the opposite, that they were shopping Askarov because Saros was doing so well, and they, by going out and signing Luke Shen and signing Ryan O'Reilly, not to say that those guys are superstars, although O'Reilly's still a really good player, that they're sort of retooling, but they're not going for the full rebuild. And if they want to be competitive, then Saros gives them a better chance in the near term than a rookie. And Askarov is well thought of. Like I said, he was one of the top 2 or 3 prospects. He's only 21 years old.
Like the next great Russian goalie might come out.
He could very well could be. So, I mean, you could get a first-round pick. You could get multiple first-round picks from the right team for a guy like him. So I don't know. I mean, Russ and I have always been skeptical of Saros when it came to the fact that he's small, but he's sort of proven people
in the playoff. That's when I'm most skeptical.
And I think there's I think they believe that. I think there's something going on with them too with that. I don't think that they're oblivious to that. I especially Poyle, who does like bigger goalies. But Saros, Pekka Rinne was his ideal goalie. Saros Saros puts up such good numbers, you can't get rid of him. That's kind of the impression I got.
Well, I talked to someone who had a lengthy conversation with Barry Trotz, and his position is that Saros makes the made the Predators look better than they really are. He is a supreme goalie, and he masked a lot of problems.
For sure.
And then so whenever they'd get up against top teams, it became difficult because even he couldn't save them. So
right, and that's exactly it. And the Predators are retooling, but they're also at their probably most popular level they've been at in a while. Right?
They're worried about it. They are. Yeah, they may be at the top level, but they're fearful.
Well, the real thing, though, I mean, obviously they're so used to the Poyle situation and how that works and everything that there's no question there's fear in that they really did the littlest change they could going to try like that.
Yeah, I mean, what they're afraid of is to tell the fans. The Red Wings and the Rangers and the Maple Leafs, these teams, they came out and they announced what they were doing. I mean, it's been 7 years. They're fearful if they're out of the playoffs for an extended period that it could be difficult. Like that, the tradition of playoffs for them is so important. So
absolutely.
And they're not confident. They're not confident.
I respect that about them. I always have, and I think that was part of Poyle, and part of his dad, Bud Poyle, even is that you never say you're rebuilding. That's like something you don't do. Like that's not
right.
The way and you keep going. And the other thing about Poyle is be aggressive and be surprising and be different. And I think from what I heard from talking to people near this situation is that Trotz has been told by Poyle to be totally different. Just go out there and be you and be aggressive and go out there and do the things that I couldn't do. Like they couldn't make some of those trades that would maybe risk our defense and stuff like that a little bit to try to get it more exciting.
I mean, what I'm talking about is ownership would not have allowed Poyle.
Yeah, they knew Poyle was so consistent. They knew what he was.
Well, yeah, and Poyle, Trotz was on his honeymoon period, so they gave him that one to go ahead and do that. So
I'm not sure if ownership would have allowed Poyle to trade Ryan Johansson for nothing and buy out Matt Duchene, but they did allow Trotz to do that. So I mean, he's trying to change the culture of that team, and I get that. I mean, if he was truly interested in sort of doing a quick rebuild and turnaround, he would trade Saros to get as bad as he could to get a chance to win the lottery and get a franchise player like who is it, Russ? Who's the kid who's the big number one?
Matt
Celebrini.
Matthew Wood.
No. That's this year's draft.
Oh, what draft are you talking about?
24 draft, the number one, who the presumptive.
Matt Celebrini.
Celebrini, yeah. So if they were interested in going after Celebrini, they would do that, but like Kevin's saying, they don't want to become inconsequential in that market for a longer period of time, so they probably can't do that. They're limited by that.
They also have a lot of belief in their young players that played at the end of the year for them and played better than they thought they would.
Here's what I took from Trotz. They were more aggressive at the draft. They did take the bigger swings that he wanted, and they did take big swings in free agency, like getting Gurianov and saying, all right, we're going to try and get you back to your 20 goals because there are some things we like here, and we're going to try and turn you into that. And I think that is different than what they would have tried before.
And Ryan O'Reilly is clearly not. That's another one too, right? That we look at. You look at him.
I think they would have done O'Reilly. I do.
You think what?
Yeah, I think they would have. He's a Nashville guy to me.
But
Yeah, I mean he's a Poyle type of guy too.
Oh, I love him, and he's a total national guy. But he's not a rebuild guy. Like he's not like we're rebuilding guy.
No, but okay. So with the moves that they made and with the players that they brought in, right now Ryan O'Reilly's their number one center. Ryan O'Reilly is not a number one center. He's a really good player. He's a leader. He's a great two-way player. He's not a number one. He's not going to put up 70 points. Now, maybe with increased ice time, he'll get up to 55. He's not a number one center, and never. He may have been 6 or 7 years ago, but he's not that player anymore. And they really don't have anybody right now who is a number one center.
They really haven't had anybody since
since Johansson had his good years there.
After a couple of good years, yeah. But
right. So I mean,
that's not their thing. That's not their team thing, though. They don't go for number one centers. I think that it's going to be. I heard that the buyouts of those two players were like kind of like Poyle's way of saying to the owners, like, we got to do this just to give Trotz the start off.
Yeah. To answer the chat, they're asking about Thomas Tatar.
I mean, I think that was true, but yeah. Go ahead, Chris. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say the chat room's asking about Thomas Tatar. My feeling on Tatar is, he's a little smaller, and even though with the Devils he was plus 41, he's been a minus most of his career. So even though he had 20 goals, I still think teams don't want to pay him that much. And I think he probably wants more than they want to give him. So they're only going to give him like a 1-year deal for probably $3 million. Like somebody might do that last minute, but that's why I think Tatar is still out there. That's my take.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Russ is right. I like him a little better than Russ does. I think he's a very consistent 20-goal scorer. He knows the net. He understands the seams in the defense. You got to accept his deficiencies. But he's a scorer, and you can count on him. You can pencil him in for those 20 goals. And I mentioned this before. There was a report out of Russia about that he was looking at the KHL, but it was hard to translate. I didn't really get a sense of it, other than the fact that there had been some talk. But I've heard his name pop up recently. I think he's going to end up here with somebody just looking for scoring, and especially if you can get him at a bargain.
Yeah, and I was just about to say, Kev, we're at that time, late August or late July, early August, where that second level free agent. I mean, obviously Tarasenko is at the highest level in terms of free agent forwards, but we're talking Tatar, we're talking Pia Suter, we're talking Josh Bailey. All these guys are going to end up probably getting a 1-year deal, $1 million, $1.5 million most, because right now all the money is spent. There's very few vacancies for these players to take. It's musical chairs, and the music's running out.
Yeah, but here's the weird thing, and this is where I'm in Kev's corner. For Suter, like, this is a guy for 3 years has scored 14, 15 goals, and he's only 27. Right. It's not like, you're getting like a 32-year-old guy, and that's all he can do. Like, I am surprised Pia Suter's not signed yet.
I'm not saying he's obviously a cap situation, because he would be. These are guys that would be signed.
I'm not saying that Suter's a bad player or Tatar's a bad player. It's just the reality of these players are getting squeezed because there's not a lot of room left.
Yeah,
and and teams have spent their money.
Last thing I wanted to say real quick, the Hockey Canada report is coming, right? And
is it? When?
At last I heard, it hasn't been out yet, right? Because like I said, I've been out of the. All right, so because I did talk to somebody a couple days ago from a team who had an idea that one of their players was in trouble for it. And they wouldn't tell me what was going on or exactly what was happening, but they said some of the moves they made have been in anticipation of this player probably having issues and probably being problems. Have you heard anything like that, Kevin?
I have not. I mean, I think that the people who have been rumored to be involved, they're all very concerned about what the impact is going to be.
No, that's for sure, yeah.
Well, one of the signs, and we found out after the report came out, was it Nike that backed out of the Hockey Canada? Yeah, then we found out that was something that was determined a while back and not recent. But we took it as a sign that, okay, if they're backing out of this, then they must know something. I mean, the thing is, we all know that something is going to happen, that something is going to go down.
There's a report, and there's a certain breadth of players, and the one thing that Mike said to me, which made sense and made me kind of go back and look at it, was you really can only do something to NHL players.
Yeah, the players who were under the standard player contract, they are subject to, the moral turpitude clauses that are in contracts. If a player is a prospect who is not under an NHL contract, then the NHL really can't penalize them because they weren't signed with
Right.
deal.
They can still get charged. Things can still happen, but they
Right.
can't. But in the end,
Legally, yes, but
I do have a sense from talking to this one team that the NHL may have let some of these teams know the players that were in the biggest trouble.
Yeah, I mean,
Does that make sense?
what I'm saying, yeah, when guys I'm seeing in trouble, I think criminally is what they're concerned about.
Yeah, no, definitely. But don't you think the NHL, because the NHL has
The league's gonna, I think what I'm talking about is like I'm not really thinking about the criminal, but you're right. But the league is going to take action and suspend some players. I think we all expect that.
Yeah, well, I think that'll be the least of their problems. If
I think we're talking. The NHL is talking to people about like teams saying that this guy might be charged criminally, and you might need to, I'm wondering if that's been told to teams because they have had this now. They've had this for a while. And if you're an owner, you can say, I know this. You're sitting on this report. When's it going to come out? I can see that happen. I can see them saying, "You might want to worry about this guy a little bit. Like he doesn't come off great in the report or that kind of thing."
Right.
I'm not saying I know that for 100% sure, but just the way that this was being discussed to me, it felt like that they knew something more than they could tell me, and that's just a hunch. So we'll see. Okay. That's all the time we have for today, folks. Remember, without the buzz, it is just hockey. It was great seeing you all, and we'll be back. We won't be back again this week because these two are going out to see that guy in Michigan, and I'll be rolling for it. But we'll be back again next week, and thanks so much for watching. And then we'll be, we're next week we're getting into August, so we're almost there. Talk to you soon.